Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mrs. Norris. I am back on site now if you are listening to this in 2021, so please excuse the background noise. It's a little loud here back on campus. So today I want to just talk to you a little bit about the assignment that you're going to be starting today. In this assignment, you'll be analyzing 19th century reforms. And reforms are movements to make change. A lot of these reforms have an impact on you on a daily basis. They impacted blacks, they impacted African or immigrants, they impacted students, women. So a lot of these 19th century movements have an effect on you today and have evolved, but are still happening in 2021. So we're going to look at those movements and kind of make an evaluation about which one benefited American society the most. So let's look at our know, understand, and do before we get into the bulk of this. So what we want to know is these two questions. How do Blacks, Native Americans, and immigrants contribute to and make sacrifices for the United States? People of color tended to be a catalyst for change or a movement for change. And so they did have to make their own sacrifices in order to go for the greater good. And so hopefully you'll learn some of those sacrifices throughout this lesson. The other question we're going to be looking at is what reforms most benefit American society and why. So you'll be answering that question at the end of this assignment. I want you to understand that periods of boom and bust created both progress and poverty. In response to the strains brought about by rapid industrialization, an age of reform began in which attempts were made to make life more bearable for the less fortunate and to expand opportunities for many. The Second Great Awakening inspired religious zeal, social reforms such as equal education for women and African Americans, and eventually support for the abolitionist movement, which is the end of slavery. As more Americans grew concerned about people who were considered to be downtrodden, they turned their reform impulses from churches and philanthropies to other sectors of society. So what we're going to be doing is analyzing and evaluating the 19th century reform movements of the Second Great Awakening. And in the year 2021, we have sort of touched upon these reforms. Today, we're going to look at them a little bit closer. So let's look at the directions. It says make a copy of the file, which we'll do in a moment. Delete the words copy of and type your first and last name. Use the text here. So we have a link right here, or you can see that the text is also below. Use that text to complete the reading task, and then you're going to submit your work in Canvas when you're done by downloading it as a PDF and then submitting. So there is a brief tutorial here if you don't know how to download a document as a PDF. Now, my suggestion to you is that you have your link here open. So if I click on the word for number 2, the text here, because this version of the reading assignment will have these audio files on them. So the audio files will be me reading the text to you. Now, also too, it is a little bit smaller here in Google Slides if you open it up this way. So please make sure that you are using your Zoom presets to make it bigger, and then you can follow along with the reading at a bigger size, okay? But again, it is also here too on Canvas. You can click through it. Sometimes the audio works, sometimes it does not, but also zooming in is a little bit more difficult. It's just your preference, okay? Now let's get to that file. I'm gonna go ahead and click on the link for the file, and I'm gonna remember to change copy of to my first and last name. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on it. I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of the document. Okay. And then where it says copy of, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to put my first and last name. So I'm just going to use my stepson's name. Okay. So please make sure you do that. It's also on your first slide. Please make sure you do that as well. So go ahead and pause this tutorial and download your file, make a copy of it, and change your name. All right, so let's take a look at what we're going to be doing today. What I suggest that you do is this Canvas page that has the tutorial that you're listening to right now. I'm going to go ahead and pop it out of my main screen, and I am going to resize so that I can watch the tutorial while I am completing the assignment. Now, obviously your text is going to get smaller, so whatever you need to do to make it easier for you to complete the task, please do that. Okay, so I'm just going to sort of move my stuff to the side. What you don't see on your screen right now, but you will see at the time of this assignment, is the tutorial. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the different reform movements in detail. Okay, so here are my reform movements again. Again, my size is pretty big. I used my preset to make sure that it was readable for me. And then when I do get to this, I am going to use that audio feature to listen to the text and follow along while I do so. Okay, so we have our different reform movements. I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller for now. We have temperance, schools, prisons, abolition, which is 2 pages, women's rights, and then our lesser knowns, which would be immigrant rights, vegetarianism, and then the right for women to choose different clothing to wear in the workplace. Okay, so our lesser knowns. So let's go back to temperance and let's look at our assignment. Okay, so on the assignment, we have it broken down 3 reforms on a slide. So on the first slide, we have temperance, schools, and then prisons. And then on the last slide, we have abolition, women's rights, and the lesser knowns with stars next to it. I'll get to those stars in a moment. The questions are the same. I'm going to go ahead again and zoom in so that you can see them a little more. So the first question we're going to be looking at is, what was it about? Discuss the goals of the movement. The second question, why did it begin? Highlight the events that led to it beginning. Who was involved in it? Describe the people that were involved. What was the outcome? Analyze the successes and or the failures. And then what does it look like today? So that's what these links are. So if you'll notice, for example, temperance is blue and underlined. If I were to hover over it and then click, here we have an example of temperance today, what it looks like today. So here's a little article, and that article will help you with the last section. What does it look like today? Okay. Now, the last one, the lesser knowns, has 3 stars next to it, or 2 stars. If you look down in the speaker notes at the bottom, it says use the internet to research one of the 3 lesser knowns. Immigrant rights, such as the Muslim ban, the border wall, something along those lines. Vegetarianism, there's a fight about labeling food products, the growth of the fake meat and dairy industry, etc., something like that. Clothing style, for example, gender equality with clothing, natural hair in schools, things like that. I want you to research one of the lesser known movements on your own and then write about it in that last square here. Once you've done that and you're choosing which one you want to look at more, copy and paste the link where you found your information in this area right down here. Okay, so let's go back to temperance. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a moment to read temperance to yourself, or to click on the audio, listen to me read it, and follow along. And then we're going to come back together and do the first one together. So I'm going to go ahead and let you do that, and then we'll come back together and continue as a group. All right, so we're coming back together to talk a little bit about temperance. And again, you should have at this point finished reading the page or listening to me read it and following along for you. So the first question is, what was it about? Discuss the goals of the movement. So what was their plan with starting the temperance movement. And if we look down, maybe we don't answer everything in order, because if I look down, we have Bartholomew Gow, who is the one who really started this whole movement. He's one of the key players. And if I'm going to answer that, I might as well also answer the fact that Susan B. Anthony and then Elizabeth Cady Stanton are also people who were involved in the temperance movement. So I'm going to go back. And in that section here, and if I want to do a bulleted list, that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and Bartholomew, you spell his name? Bartholomew Gow, Susan B. Anthony, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Now, also too, is not just the people who are involved, but if you look here, it says under the caption for the picture, it says followers of the temperance movement who took the pledge to give up consuming alcohol were said to have joined the Cold Water Army. So I'm going to go ahead and use that as one of the groups that is involved. Cold Water Army. Okay. Now, if I'm going back to John Bartholomew, and again, why don't you go ahead and pause the tutorial and write those 4 answers down in why did it, oh, those are my why did it begin. Wrong box. I'm gonna go here. Okay. So if you want to go ahead and pause the tutorial and write those 4 things down in the who was involved in it section, and then we'll continue on together. Okay, now let's go back and see why did it begin is probably going to be our easier one. And again, we can do this as a bulleted list. So drinking was a large part of everyday life. We have, it was, let's see, Americans turned to alcohol to ease their pain of losing their farms, homes, and jobs. Let me make this a little bit bigger for all of us here. It said that there were public intoxication was widespread, binge drinking was common, there was spousal abuse and family neglect destroying families. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight some of those things, pull some of those things out, just in a bulleted list. It doesn't have to be complete sentences. So let's go back here. Drinking became an everyday event. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Okay. And again, this is my why did it begin? Okay, what else do we have here? Americans used alcohol to ease their pain. Okay. What else do we have? Public intoxication and binge drinking were common. Okay, and then we have spousal abuse, family neglect. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and pause the tutorial and write those things down in the section that says why did it begin, and we are under temperance, you may go ahead and pause the tutorial and write that down. Okay, so what was it about? What were the goals of the movement? So I'm going to go back to what John Bartholomew said. He wanted everyone to sign a pledge to forever abstain from drinking, so refrain yourself from doing something. Okay, so they want to make sure that they encourage people to stop drinking. What else does it say here? I'm looking down in the section about Susan B. Anthony. That's really kind of the big thing. Is it sounds like the big thing is stop drinking, period. That's the end of it. That's what they want you to do. That's their goal. I also came upon another group involved, the Women's Temperance Society. So I'm going to go ahead and write that here. Encourage, where it says, what was it about? Encourage Americans to stop drinking alcohol. That's it. So if you want to pause the tutorial and write that down, you can do that now. Okay, and then I'm going to go down to who was involved in it, and I'm going to write down that the name of that, the Women's Temperance, I think it was Society. Okay, if you want to go ahead and pause the tutorial and add that to our who was involved in it, you can do that now. All right, and then the last one for the reading, what was the outcome? Analyze its successes and or failures. So if I go down to the final paragraph, it talks about how it was the most successful of all of the antebellum reforms. And antebellum means pre-war, so events that occurred pre-war, leading up to a war. Many states passed laws that placed limits on the sale of alcohol. The average consumption dropped from 6 to 3 gallons, and it turned something that was socially acceptable into something that was unacceptable. So I'm going to go ahead and add those to my notes in a bullet point. Okay, so bullet point. States passed laws limiting alcohol. I'm gonna make sure I get it right. Sales. What else happened? Annual consumption dropped from 6 to 3 gallons. Annual consumption dropped from 6 to 3 gallons. And then let's see here. It says it turned something that was socially acceptable into something that was unacceptable. So it turned alcohol into something that was unacceptable. Okay. So if you want to go ahead and pause the tutorial and write those 3 bullets in the what was the outcome section of the chart, you can go ahead and pause it now. All right, so I'm going to take a look at the last question. Now, before I move on, I do want to show you that, yes, in fact, the slides did get cut off at the bottom. So if that's the issue, it could be because these are in bullets. But what I want to do, and I'm going to express this to you as clearly as possible, what I want to do is make sure that everything stays on the one slide. Okay. The reason why that's important is because anything that is not on the slide itself, when you download it as a PDF, it's not going to show up. So you're not going to get credit for that work. So normally if you were turning this in as a Google Doc, it wouldn't be that big of an issue. But because you're turning it in as a PDF, you have to be really careful. So if putting it in bullet points was a problem, then take those bullet points off. If you need to make this text size a little bit smaller, That's okay too. I'm going to be able to read it because I can make my screen bigger, and that would be fine. I'm going to go ahead, but you'll have to change the text size on everything. So again, if you need to make your text smaller, so I'm going to go ahead and click on the box itself, the chart itself, and I'm going to make the text smaller so that everything fits. Again, it needs to stay fitting onto one page. If I don't make it fit onto one page, then when I download it as a PDF, then I'm going to have a problem. I, as your teacher, won't be able to grade your work. So again, if you click anywhere, let me make this just a tad bit smaller here. I'm going to make it fit. If you click anywhere on the box, and then you see that there's a blue box now around my table. If I click on that blue box, and then up here where my font sizes are, there's not a number, that's okay. If I just hit the subtract sign, it will decrease all the fonts by one, which now the entire thing fits onto one page. So it's a good thing that I did that, because again, when you download this as a PDF, I won't be able to read everything if you don't have it set correctly. Okay. Now, the final question I'm going to let you do on your own, it says, what does it look like today? So again, I clicked on the word temperance, and I've got this link here. So if I click on the same link opens up here, and read through this, I can kind of summarize in one or two bullet points what this looks like today. Okay. So again, in just one or two bullet points, tell me what the temperance movement looks like in the 20th century, in the 21st century. Okay, so that is this assignment. When you are done, you're going to want to make sure that everything fits onto one slide. If it doesn't fit onto one slide, then I'm not going to be able to read everything, and you won't be able to get full credit. So if you need to decrease your font size a little bit, that's fine, because I, on the other end, can zoom in to read your work. But you do need to make sure that you go to File when you're completely done, and then Download. And you're going to download this as a PDF document. Okay, you'll see it's showing up down here at the bottom. Mine saves on my desktop, so I can see that there it is right here. Okay, and then I can go ahead and upload it into Canvas. And once I've done that, if there's a new assignment, I can move on to the next assignment.